So there are some pretty unprecedented times, and I know that word is like way overused, but I'm using it anyway because like it's really true. Like stuff out there, it's unprecedented. How do you deal with that? How do you manage in this time of nonlinearity where everything is going wonky? What I mean by nonlinearity is in the past, the future often looked quite like the present. So you could take the present and what was happening here and now and project forward pretty directly into the future, minus a few major weird events from time to time, like the 9/11 attacks here in the United States. Those few unpredictable events, you could just project into the future and say, okay, tomorrow will look like yesterday. But now that ain't happening anymore. It's not like that whole thing of like I can predict the past doesn't predict future results or whatever they say in investing. Past performance does not predict future results. So we are in those times where past performance does not predict future results. Like for those who are more on the doom and gloom side, which I'm reforming, maybe I'm never fully reformed, gloom and doomer. I get it. It's easy to like look at all of this and project now linearly forward from, it seems like things, especially here in the United States, keep getting worse. But it's not only here in the United States, there are things going on all over the world that are pretty, here's that word again, unprecedented. So how do we deal with it? Well, what I want to do here, and this is just the start of a series, is tell you my story. How did I go from being a scientist, like not just some scientist working in some hidden cubbyhole of industry. No, I was a scientist leading a large research lab at a major R1 research university with like $1 million a year of funding, multiple what are called R01 grants. I won't bore you with the technical details, but like they're considered like the most prestigious grants you can get in biomedical science. And I was working on the Human Genome Project, right? So like that's like some hardcore science there. So how did I go from that, and also at the time a lot of gloom and doom thinking, a lot of we're headed in a very bad direction, to now where even though on the outside world seems even more insane and more crazy, where I am, you could say psychic and more optimistic than I have been in years. Like how could that happen? And I just want to say, before you tune off and turn off and say, this is a crazy person, this wasn't an all-at-once thing. It didn't involve me like falling into some cult. I'm not a part of any organization, except I'm part of a business mastermind for my main business that I do to help me like optimize that business. But I'm not like, there's no other thing going on here. There's no like cult or whatever. And I'm following in a tradition of people that I've always looked at and been curious about. I think about former academics like Wayne Dyer. Wayne Dyer was an academic, and then he left academia to start his independent publishing career. And he's somebody who was really like interested in psychology and raising kids, and wrote some very dense, sort of academic seeming books. Like by dense, I tried to get through some of them and I couldn't. Not his earlier books, like it was just like too much. I can read that kind of stuff if I need to for work, but I'm not going to do it for like pleasure, for free time. No way. Anyway, his earlier works, and then later on in his last work before he died, he was talking about like glowing orbs and how they kept appearing on pictures of him and stuff like that. And at the time I was like looking at that and saying, that's a very weird transition. Like, how did he go from this person over here to this person who's like talking about orbs? Or Gay Hendricks is another former academic who then got into personal development. And as far as I know, he hasn't gone quite as far off the deep end as into like orbs or whatever. I don't want to cast any aspersions. But here's the thing, like, even saying something like orbs, like I used to be afraid of saying, well, this is at least interesting. I'm curious about, could these orbs be real? Could there be something to it? Like this guy, Wayne Dyer, seemed pretty grounded, and then started talking about, what is this something I should consider? And I want to sort of jump ahead to the answer to my story, to the short answer to the story, but then I'll, of course, tell you over future videos, like key moments in this story that got me from there to here. From there, that total scientist materialist, to here, somebody who's very open to things like energy and consciousness and even psychic channeling kind of stuff. So there are others who've taken that path too. I've read many of the books, the Seth books by Jane Roberts, and Jane Roberts went from being a very staid journalist, an academically trained journalist, but she was not an academic, she was a practicing journalist who was reporting on the occult. And after doing some reporting and having some crazy experiences, she then started channeling this entity, Seth. And the books are some amazing books. They're hard to read. Like, some would say they're as dense as the Wayne Dyer stuff, but to me they were more interesting because they get more at the fundamentals of what our reality is about. So she's another person who went down. And I've recently heard about other people, quote, coming out as psychics who were in very regular jobs in very staid professions who are now saying, I'm psychic. I'm doing this thing that used to be verboten. And I want to talk about this. And first, actually, I want to talk about that verboten thing, that why we are afraid of this, like why this is so important for our current lives. Okay, so I'll start with that one. Why is this so important right now? Because when you're in nonlinear times, you can't look to the old solutions. I like to call them old boxes of logic. What I mean by a box of logic is this well-worn intellectual territory where we're ruminating over the same paths again and again. And we're just expecting that everything in our lives, in the world, in the future should fit into that box of logic that we've been going around and around in. It's sort of like, it's like a dog who's in a fenced yard who can travel paths, and there are infinite paths that it could travel within the yard, but it's still very constrained. And that's what boxes of logic do to us. Like, we get trapped in these boxes of logic, certain pathways, certain ways of thinking. Some people, like in the personal development world, like to talk about them as beliefs. I think beliefs that's fine, but it's like a simplistic terminology. Box of logic really implies there are multiple pathways of logic that you could call beliefs that all work together and form that sort of cage that you can get stuck in. And so I think in normal times, we can do reasonably well being stuck in our box of logic. We might have midlife crises or things like that because we get tired of that box of logic. And so I think that's part of what a midlife crisis is. That's normal times. This is not normal times. We need to escape the pre-existing boxes of logic that we were all buying into before, because that logic no longer works. So what else is there? Logic can't build itself. Logic can't escape itself. It doesn't do that. I've often talked about Gödel's incompleteness theorem, which is really the idea that your logic is always relying on premises, and you have to make new premises. You can't include those inside your logic and prove that they're true. That's a very simplistic way of explaining Gödel's incompleteness theorem. You can look into that, and I've probably talked about it on other videos, but it really says that our logic is limited. It's limited. We get trapped in it, and we have to use something other than logic to escape those boxes of logic. And earlier today, I was writing for a piece that I'm doing about imagination, and how imagination is one of the things, not the only thing, but one of the things that allows us to step out of a box of logic and imagine a different scenario, imagine a different way that things could be, imagine different logic. It's a different faculty than our reasoning faculty. And so why are we then, okay, so that's why it's necessary. Like, that's why it's important to us in this point in history, because we're being asked by all of these events, forced, you could say, if you don't like the sort of animistic, forced to consider different boxes of logic going forward. We are being forced to. Like, we can't rely on the old patterns, the old logic anymore. We just can't. But a lot of people are still like putting their head in the sand and saying, no, 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 someday like this too shall pass and it will return to normal. Well, I agree, this too shall pass, but it's not going to return to the old normal, the old logic. It's just not going to go back there. It's not. It doesn't. We can't go back. So we need other tools besides the intellect. So that was the first point. Like if you're really wanting to figure out what's going on, taking a bigger perspective, approaching this with curiosity is so key to having a functional and even optimistic outlook at this time. Because if you're stuck in those old boxes of logic, it is very pessimistic. It's very grim looking out there. I'll tell you that. And I've been there. I know that. I've ruminated a lot on some of the stuff going on and finally decided, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. That's no fun. That sucks. And I'd rather be imagining a better future. So imagination is one of the faculties. I'll talk about some of the others later in future videos. But the point is, it's opening to something besides the logic is how you get through. This is how you deal with these nonlinear times, is you say, I can't rely on that old logic anymore. I have to find new logic, and the only way I can do that is going outside of the logic that I've been in. I can't, so that's the first thing. The second thing, why are we so fearful to talk about, to discuss things like channeling or being, quote, psychic or astrology or a premonition? Somebody was just telling me today about her meeting with some girlfriends when they were in college, and they were talking about astrology, and then one of them said, oh, I'm a Pisces or whatever, and because I'm a Pisces I do such and such. And another one is like, shh, let's be quiet about it. And that's really how our society has been about this stuff. Is like, shh, anything UFO, anything Bigfoot, anything psychic, anything premonition, anything really anything, but the standard box of logic that says this is a material world and it's grim what's happening out there, and it's all created by randomness, and it's ultimately going to lead to a heat death of the universe. That's one of the boxes of logic. There's a very much more religious box of logic which says something similar, except that it's just like dark forces. The universe was created in purity, but then dark forces came in and created impurity, and we've been living in this impurity ever since, and it's just getting worse and worse. I mean, okay, so those are some boxes of logic, right? So why are we afraid of examining, using curiosity, open-mindedness to look at some other possibilities, to just ask questions without already having the answer? Because if you already have the answer, then you are stuck in a box of logic. You are not actually using imagination or true curiosity. You're just trying to say, I want to fit this thing into my neat box of logic and explain it away. It's like near-death experiences. Like talking about near-death experiences, it's like a verboten subject in many circles, and especially academia. In academic research, you don't talk about things like near-death experiences. How could that possibly happen if the brain is dead, if the heart isn't pumping? How could you possibly explain that? It must be a hallucination, something in the neurons are producing that or whatever. Yes, that's one box of logic. That's saying, I have my box of logic and I'm clinging to it. I'm afraid of going outside of it. And so I'm going to cling to it at all costs, regardless of what kind of twisted contortions I have to go through. And you can look at politics these days and see people doing that all the time. They are looking to defend, twist everything around their own boxes of logic. It doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum. There are boxes of logic there, and they're defending them against the other boxes over there. So that's the first reason we have so much fear about it, is like we're so stuck in this idea of being right that we don't actually, and being right about our box of logic, and we're so afraid to be challenged in that. It bugs me. It's like, that's really weird. Why are we so afraid of that? And the only answer I've come up with is that I think that people in power over the years, whether it's religion or academic institutions, both, because in many ways, religions and academic institutions have operated on similar principles of indoctrination. I hate to say that as a former academic because I know you're going to be like, no, that's not, they're very different. But if you really look at how they operate, there are some surprising similarities in how they indoctrinate and steep people in their own boxes of logic. They are very different boxes of logic in many cases, but they're still indoctrinating people into boxes of logic. And then teaching people to be afraid of anything that is not that. And I think it helps the people who are in power in those institutions stay in power, because then if they're the only ones who can like stretch the box of logic or extend it, then there's sort of this singular point that you have to go to in order to escape or get out or do something new or see something from a different way. You have to rely on somebody else who's that person in power, rather than relying on you, yourself, to actually see, oh, things could be different. We don't have to do it this way. This is actually kind of stupid, right? Why are we what? I can't believe we're doing it this way. And if you look at modern academia, I had that kind of issue, that kind of question, like, why the hell are we doing this way? We're supposed to be here to do research. This isn't very efficient. We're supposed to be here to teach students. This isn't very efficient. And it drove me crazy. And it's one of the big reasons I ended up leaving, because I just couldn't handle the cognitive dissonance anymore, the craziness of like, just do it this way because it's the way that so-and-so said. And it's, why is so-and-so saying that? Well, because so-and-so is the authority. So-and-so is the senior professor. So-and-so has been published in Nature. Okay, so what? That doesn't mean they have like a lock on all of everything forever, but it acts that way. And again, I want to be fair and say religion has a lot of this, probably even more of this, right? So I think we've been trained from an early age, most of us, to be afraid of going outside of those boxes. I mean, how else could we explain that we have fear of just talking about something like, I want to talk about psychic stuff. Does that exist? Is it real? I have doubts. Even though I say I channel, I still have doubts sometimes when I get messages and I'm like, really? I don't know about that. So I'll still question it, but that's the key. I want to wrap up this video because it's getting long. The key to it all is true curiosity. Not just a curiosity, a fake curiosity, a faux pseudo curiosity. I'm saying that word as many ways as I can to really drive the message home. A fake curiosity that says, oh yeah, I'll listen to that until it violates my box of logic, and then I'll like say, no, it can't be. Impossible. There's a book called Skeptical About Skeptics. Really interesting little book. There's a skeptics movement that like claims to go out and debunk all this stuff that you might question. But then there's a book that says the skeptics actually, he makes a strong argument, the skeptics actually behave more like religious people than actual skeptics, because actual skeptics just question, open-mindedly question. Many of the so-called skeptics themselves don't question. They know. They come in already, quote, knowing. They come in stuck in their box of logic and saying, that can't be, and something is wrong with you. But the good news is that the skeptics, their day is long over. Like, yes, I'm sure there are some still out there who will object to me saying that, but they have no answers for us in this world right now, where things are going wonky, and they're probably going to get more wonky before they get better, much more wonky. I think we're in store for some pretty interesting times, like the may you live in interesting times. So in this series, I want to talk about my journey, how I got here to this point where I can say something like, yeah, I've been receiving messages that match up with a lot of the messages I'm seeing out there in other people doing things like channeling and astrology and so many things, that we're in for a bit of a ride here, folks. But it doesn't have to be negative. Not for you. It could be En masse, if you look at it as from a picture of en masse, it might look pretty grim, but that doesn't mean it has to be grim for everybody individually, for you individually. It does not have to be grim. It does not have to be negative. This is a time, looking from the higher perspective, this is a time of change, of transformation. Change is painful. If you're bringing a new child into the world, that is painful. That is messy. I haven't gone through it myself, but it is painful and messy from everything that I know about it. And that is something that, even though it's painful and messy, it leads to a beautiful result, bringing a new, beautiful being into the world. That's what we're going through. We are going through that childbirth right now. It is painful, it is messy, but if we understand that we are going through this for something better on the other side, then we can bring back some optimism and say, okay, I understand, I can be more grounded. So I'll wrap up this overly long video with, meanwhile, ground yourself. It's so important to connect to the earth, to the water, to places like this. Whatever you have locally, you may not have something like this locally, but just whatever you can connect to in outdoors, in nature, breathing, meditating. These are all so important, such important things at this time. Turn off the social media, turn off the news, and ground yourself. Connect. Focus on yourself and your health. It's the most important thing you can do right now. And I look forward to sharing more of my story with you.